From JBS Studios in Greater New York, this is the JBS News Update with Teisha Bader.
I'm Teisha Bader with the JBS News Update for Tuesday, July the 24th, 2018. Israel's Air Force shot down a Syrian fighter jet that infiltrated Israeli airspace today. The IDF said 2 Patriot missiles were fired at a Syrian Sukhoi model fighter jet, which they said was traveling at high speeds towards Israel's Golan Heights. The IDF said they monitored the jet as it approached Israel's border and issued multiple warnings to the aircraft, which were not heeded, ultimately shooting the jet down after it entered about a mile into Israeli airspace. The jet crashed in Syria. Syria claims the jet was in Syrian airspace when it was shot at. This was the first time that Israel has shot down a Syrian fighter jet since 2014. IDF spokesperson Lieutenant Colonel Jonathan Conricus told reporters, "We have issued numerous warnings through numerous channels and in various languages to make sure that no one on the other side violates Israeli airspace or threatens Israeli civilians or sovereignty." Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said Israel acted appropriately, calling the infiltration a blatant violation of the 1974 separation agreement between Israel and Syria. He said, "We will not accept any such penetration of or spillover into our territory, neither on the ground nor in the air." Meanwhile, at the Gaza border, a reduction in the number of incendiary devices being sent over the border fence has led to a partial reopening of the Kerem Shalom border crossing into Gaza. Israel had partially closed the crossing last week in response to the non-stop flaming devices, but Israel's Defense Minister Avigdor Lieberman said attacks had somewhat subsided, and this afternoon gasoline and diesel fuel were once again allowed through the crossing, in addition to the food and medical supplies which have passed through the crossing daily despite the closure. Lieberman's office said the minister's decision came from the fact that Hamas has not completely stopped its terrorist activities, but has tried to keep them at a low level of incendiary balloon launches and clashes on the border, with known Hamas members responsible for it. Later today, however, arson balloons were once again launched into southern Israel, prompting the IDF to fire at the terror cell launching them with an Israeli drone. Hamas reports that 3 members of that cell were injured. Jewish restaurant critic Jonathan Gold has died. Gold, a beloved mainstay in the Los Angeles scene, wrote for the LA Times, LA Weekly, and Gourmet, and was the first restaurant critic to win a Pulitzer Prize. He also won several James Beard Foundation Journalism Awards. He died on Saturday from pancreatic cancer. He was 57. A Muslim leader in Denmark was charged with incitement today for allegedly calling for the killing of Jews in a sermon that he gave earlier this year at a mosque in Copenhagen. French news agency AFP reports that a complaint was filed against Imam Muntir Abdallah by the local Jewish community back in May, and today the imam was charged in Copenhagen District Court. This is the first time such charges have been issued under a new hate speech law on religious preaching that was passed in Denmark last year. The Times of Israel reports that Austria's vice chancellor said today that ritual slaughter, known in Hebrew as shrita, should be banned in his country. Heinz Christian Strack, who also leads the far-right Freedom Party, wrote on his Facebook page that the practice performed by both Jewish and Muslim communities should generally be prohibited without prior anesthetization, just like in other EU countries. A statement that is at odds with Austrian Chancellor Sebastian Kurz, who just last week promised his government will in no way limit the Jewish community's ability to produce and consume kosher meat. Israel's ambassador to Austria, Martin Weiss, told the Times of Israel today that a compromise was reached about 15 years ago on the question of kosher and halal slaughter in Austria. He said Chancellor Kurz has repeatedly underlined the importance of Jewish life in Austria and has made it clear that no changes to this practice will find a majority in a government under his leadership. Well, a Jewish American World War II soldier listed as missing for over 70 years was buried in California last week. The LA Times reports Staff Sergeant David Rosenkrantz's remains were recovered and identified in March. near the farm where he was killed at the age of 28. On September the 28th of 1944, Rosencrantz was shot by the Germans during Operation Market Garden in the Netherlands, a battle immortalized in the 1977 film A Bridge Too Far. U.S. troops were unable to recover his body at the time, and he had been listed as missing for decades until research by one of Rosencrantz's nephews and another researcher led them to his remains. Rosencrantz was laid to rest Friday at the Riverside National Cemetery with over 30 members of his extended family present. Taking a look now at our programming for tonight on JBS for Tuesday, July the 24th at 7 o'clock. It's a look at Islamic extremism. At 7:30, a look back at the Oslo Accords with Dennis Ross, Tal Becker, Nikolai Mladenov, and Fernando Gentilini, with American Jewish Committee's Melanie Marin-Pell at the 2018 AJC Global Forum in Jerusalem. At 9, Mark Golub sits down with architect of the Accords, Yossi Beilin, on L'chaim. At 10:30, the film Wrestling Jerusalem is in the spotlight on New Jewish Cinema. And coming up right after this newscast tonight at 6:30, Mark Golub speaks with Bar-Ilan professor Mordechai Kedar on the controversial nation-state law passed last week by Israel's Knesset. And that's the JBS News Update for Tuesday, July the 24th, 2018. I'm Teisha Bader.